Hello and welcome to QuickTale English. Today we enter the world of shadows and secrets in our detective story, Legacy from the Darkness. The air in Blackwood Manor was cold and heavy, even though it was summer outside. The old house stood on a remote hill, surrounded by thick, dark trees. Inside, the massive parlor felt silent and tense. I, Mr. Silas, the family lawyer, sat at the head of a long, polished table. I held the last will and testament of the late Lord Alistair Blackwood. Lord Blackwood had been immensely wealthy, and his sudden death last week had brought his surviving relatives together for the reading of his final wishes. 3 people were present. First, Eleanor, the eldest daughter. She was dressed in black and wore a look of cold impatience. She saw herself as the rightful owner of everything. Second, Thomas, the ambitious son. He fidgeted constantly, tapping his foot. I knew he needed the inheritance urgently to settle heavy debts. Third, Aunt Clara, a distant cousin who pretended to be sweet but watched everyone with sharp, nervous eyes. The tension in the room was palpable. I cleared my throat and announced, "We will begin the official reading at 8 o'clock this evening. Lord Blackwood's instructions were very clear." The next few hours were filled with silent hostility. No one spoke. They only watched each other. Around 7:30, Thomas stood up. "I need to take a call," he muttered, walking quickly out of the parlor and into the long, shadowy hallway. We waited for 10 minutes. The heavy pendulum clock in the hall ticked loudly. Thomas did not return. Eleanor sighed heavily. "He is always late," she said, her voice sharp. I waited 5 more minutes, then stood up. "Thomas is missing," I stated simply. "We must find him." The search began immediately. The parlor, the kitchen, the library, all were empty. We checked the main staircase and the drawing room. In the long hallway near the old telephone stand, I found something worrying. Thomas's expensive silver watch lay on the thick rug. It was a watch he never took off. "He probably just dropped it," Eleanor said, but her voice lacked conviction. Aunt Clara began to panic. Her face turned pale. "He wouldn't leave his watch. Someone has taken him. Someone wants the money for themselves," she cried. I tried to call the local police, but a fierce, sudden storm had knocked out the phone lines and the internet connection. We were isolated on the hill. The reading of the will had to wait. We had a mystery now. We continued searching for hours, calling his name through the echoing, cold corridors. Nothing. Thomas had vanished into the shadows of Blackwood Manor. That night, fear replaced greed. Aunt Clara was terribly nervous. She refused to sleep in a dark room. I walked her to her bedroom on the 2nd floor. She locked the heavy wooden door behind her with 2 loud clicks. "I don't trust anyone here, Mr. Silas," she whispered through the wood. In the morning, the house was silent. Eleanor and I met in the dining room, looking at each other with fear and suspicion. "We must check on Clara," I decided. We went upstairs. I knocked heavily on Aunt Clara's door. No answer. I knocked again. I tried the handle. The door was still locked firmly from the inside. "Clara, are you all right?" I called. Silence. Eleanor helped me break the door open. The lock snapped with a loud crack. The room was empty. Aunt Clara was gone. The window was closed and latched. Even if it had been open, the drop to the stone terrace below was impossible to survive. The room showed no signs of a struggle. The only thing out of place was found on her pillow. Clara's favorite long string of pearls, arranged neatly in a circle. Like Thomas's watch, it was something she never parted with. Panic was now a cold certainty. This was not a runaway. This was a deliberate and impossible disappearance. I was alone with Eleanor, and the massive inheritance was now within the grasp of only one person. I became the detective. I walked through the house, trying to think like Lord Blackwood. He loved secrets. I returned to the parlor, the scene of the first vanishing. I realized the watch and the pearls were the key. Why leave them? The clues were left to make the disappearances look strange but not violent. They looked like the victims left on their own, leaving a simple, personal message. But what if the person leaving them was the killer, trying to prove the disappearances were impossible to achieve? I looked closely at the spot where Thomas's watch was found. I knelt down and checked the rug. I found something tiny and easy to miss. A small silver thread, the kind used in fine silk gloves. Eleanor had been wearing fine silk gloves yesterday evening. I walked back to Eleanor, who was sitting quietly by the fireplace, reading a very old book. "Eleanor," I said, my voice low and steady, "when Thomas disappeared, you said he ran away. When Clara disappeared, you said it was impossible. But both times, something was left behind, a watch and pearls." She did not look up from her book. "It is a cruel coincidence, Mr. Silas. The house is old, perhaps a secret passage." "No," I replied firmly. "The will divides the entire estate equally between the three of you. Thomas was removed from the competition. Clara was removed from the competition. Now only you remain to claim the fortune. And I found this." I showed her the silver thread. "From your gloves. You were the last person near Thomas before he vanished. You were also the last person to check on Clara before I broke the door." She slowly closed the book. Her face was calm, but her eyes were cold and hard, the coldness of absolute greed. "You are very observant for a lawyer," she whispered. "The watch was heavy. The pearls were pretty. I thought they added a nice mysterious touch. They made the event seem confusing." She confessed. She had poisoned Thomas slowly, causing him to collapse in the hallway, then dragged him through a tiny old service door hidden behind the phone stand. She had used a sleeping powder on Clara's tea, then entered the room using a second key, taken her away, and locked the door from the inside before climbing back out the same door. All for the money. I finally managed to repair the phone line and called the police. As I waited for help to arrive, sitting opposite the cold, silent Eleanor in the massive parlor, the house felt even heavier than before. The inheritance was secured, but it was now tainted by darkness and death. The legacy of Lord Blackwood was not money, but a tragedy built on extreme avarice. Thank you for joining QuickTale English. Subscribe for more thrilling mysteries and continue practicing your B1 English. See you next time.